You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello and welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today we welcome Karen Babington onto the podcast. Karen is the co-founder at a new business called Valafy, which is the topic of conversation today. But this is terribly formal because Karen is very involved in the Today's media business as well. And of course, we speak regularly, Karen. So it's very strange to have you on the other side of this podcast.
Yes, that is strangely formal for us, isn't it, given we speak to each other throughout the week. And I think we've just been commenting the 10 minutes before this podcast might have been the most interesting bit as well, but I don't really want to say that. I shouldn't really say that, should I? Anyway, it's very kind of you to invite me on.
The topic of today's discussion is we're going to talk a little bit about the new business, about Valafy. You're going to tell me a little bit about what it is and talk a little bit about data, efficiency, business improvement, because that's part of what Valafy is out to help firms achieve. My first question is always the same, though. I know who you are, Karen Babington, enough said. But for the benefit of listeners, who are you and what do you do?
I'm very long in the tooth, so I will be very pleased that this is a podcast and not a video. But essentially, and I don't know whether you even know some of this, but I've got a background and I've even got some paper qualifications in sales and marketing. So that's essentially where I started from. Not entirely true, actually. I was reflecting with my cousin in a laboratory, and because I wanted to be a mad scientist, but then I became allergic to all the chemicals, so the conveyancing industry got me instead. But yeah, my early years were spent working for a lender, predominantly marketing mortgages, and in a department that was weirdly called mortgage advances. And then subsequently, I've worked in a variety of law firms, really. Sizable ones, smaller ones, and somehow I've managed to clock up 3 panel management companies for conveyancing, one of which I owned. And I guess in more recent years, I am kind of the Robin to Batman of Chris Harris at LawyerChecker, which kind of brings us up to date. I obviously love today's media. My heart and soul is in today's media, so you will have me as long as I can add value to you. But in the last year, I've also co-founded a couple of other companies, and one's called Collaborative Conveyancing, and I believe you've got Chris on a podcast coming soon.
We have.
And that's a startup tech company. I do love a startup, with a sole focus of tackling the pain of dealing with conveyancing inquiries. That's very exciting. And then, of course, we've got Valafy, which is the company I want to talk to you about today, and it's linked very closely with my sales and marketing background.
A useful introduction, thank you, Karen. I didn't know that you wanted to be a mad scientist, but it starts to make a little bit of sense now. So the podcast comes 2 weeks after National Conveyancing Week. You chaired a session on panel management, and you alluded to your panel management experience there. And of course, it was the week of the British Conveyancing Awards where Valafy was involved. Thank you for your support. What prompted Valafy to get involved at such an early stage as well?
Yes, it is an early stage because we've not launched yet. We don't launch until April. And the award of National Conveyancing Week was fantastic. Thank you. I was very honoured to chair a panel management session there and enjoy the awards. I guess, if I was going to be cliched, I'd say it was a no-brainer that Chris and I felt we should support an industry that has supported us for so many years. Why wouldn't we? So it was less about Valafy and more about us wanting to support it. That said, from a Valafy point of view, one of the objectives of National Conveyancing Week is ensuring that fees can be set and kept at acceptable levels. I absolutely believe that what conveyancers do is mystified, and as a result, it's very difficult to explain to all parties why they completely earn their fees. And if the one thing that comes out of National Conveyancing Week is that fees can be set and kept at acceptable levels, which is one of the objectives, Well, do you know what? I think you and Rob Hellstone should be very, very proud, David. It's right up our street. And actually, it was a discussion at the panel management session, and Valafy is all about, setting the right fee levels and running your business well. So that was a very long-winded answer to why we wanted to be involved, but we had a great week.
Which leads rather neatly on to telling us a little bit about what Valafy is.
Yeah, well, our strapline is Actionable Business Insights, which I quite like. I didn't even write either. And we've got big ambitions for Valafy. We're launching in early April. And we're launching with Conveyancing because it's familiar to us, not surprisingly. And we'll be going on to wills and probate not far into the horizon. But we have big ambitions to bring it to other sectors and professions as well, where we can add benefit. I mean, I think the reality is that all companies who want to maintain or grow need to look at their external environment, in order to plan ahead. They need that information, they need that data. And our Valafy reports provide businesses with business intelligence. But it's not business intelligence that goes back years and years. It's very current. And I think, as a business owner, I've often gone and sought out information and not been able to find it. I love market research, so it's completely my bag. And these reports are designed so that they can be actionable business insights. They can be looked at and they can be acted on. So as a business owner, what do you want to know? You want to know, are you charging at the right level? You want to know how efficient you are. You want to know if you're paying your people correctly. Conveyancing at the moment, and I know this from attending the home buying and selling group, it's fast changing at the moment. You report on it every day. It's really hard to keep up. And we've chosen to do these reports on a quarterly intervals so that, you can see what's happening on the very now. Am I spending too much? Am I spending too little? Am I earning enough profit? And the list goes on. So that information as a business owner would help me to determine what incremental improvements can be made to my profitability and efficiency. And that's what Valafy is all about. And we've worked together a long time, David. I can't remember exactly what you used to say, but your catchphrase was definitely about incremental steps, wasn't it? And it's just really stuck with me. Can you remember what you used to say?
Yeah, it's marginal gains.
Marginal gains, there you go.
Marginal gains. Japanese word is kaizen, and it's the philosophy of, it was made famous by Dave Brailsford and the British cycling teams that have obviously been very successful at the Olympics. And the concept is that if you can improve everything you do by just a few percentage points, it all adds up to a much larger overall gain. I guess my first challenge to this then is that why is this needed? Why is it, do you think, that the legal sector simply doesn't have its finger on the pulse when it comes to this sort of information?
I don't think that's actually the case, if I may disagree with you. I do think the legal sector has its finger on the pulse, but equally I think that, from conversations with law firms, there's the ones that are run very well, there's a desire to know more. And I think part of National Conveyancing Week and all the stuff we do is talk about working together as an industry, isn't it? But equally, as law firms, you are in competition with other law firms. So you do, you can't share everything, can you? From my point of view, I do think it's got its finger on the pulse. But equally, there's different parts to law firms, isn't there? And, having had a background and a real interest in market research, as I said, I've often looked for information that isn't available. And that's what Valafy is seeking to do. And the data's there, David. Every firm will have to hand their revenues, their costs, and profit is revenue minus costs. So if you keep it simple, and you've just talked about marginal gains here, the fees for a sale of, let's say, £1,000 if we were to charge, and it costs us £900, it's going to give you £100 profit, isn't it? And I'm keeping my numbers very simple here as well. But, if you raise that fee by 1% and you carry out one more case and £100, that makes you £9 more efficient, and on it goes. But how do you do that unless you know how you compare with your peers? And that's what we hope to do. We hope to take data that is already there, collate it, and then be able to share it in an anonymised fashion.
So this is a quarterly report then that kind of brings the whole of the industry together?
Yeah, it's a quarterly questionnaire, actually. It's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because you want the report to have enough information to make it really useful, but you don't want to take up too much time from what is already a busy conveyancing department. We've looked at information that I think, or I believe, that law firms will have. So they'll either have it from their case management system or their financial accounting. So we'll be asking in the questionnaire, for example, number of sale cases you've completed, what your sale fees are, the same with purchase, the same with remortgage, where you're getting your work from. So, is your source of work. No, we're not asking here that you'll get it from particular new build company. We're asking, do you get it from developers? Do you get it from estate agents? How does that compare to the previous quarter? What's changed? And we can collate all of that. And then we've thrown in some additional questions from doing our own market research and speaking to law firms about what they'd like to know. So, what increase have you seen in professional indemnity insurance, in tech spend? So this is essentially another example of law firms working together, completing questionnaires, and we are simply the facilitator to collate that, anonymise it, and deliver it back in a very pretty and lovely report that we've spent many months working on.
Dare I say that a previous podcast that we had identified that 2/3 of firms simply aren't tracking their quotes or conversions. So to assume, and it's very dangerous to assume, isn't it? But to perhaps assume that firms have got this information to hand, is that dangerous?
Yes, perhaps. However, it's not mandatory to answer every single question. So you answer the questions where you have got the information available. And and we have spoken to case management companies as well. We know that most firms, certainly the serious players within conveyancing, use case management systems, and we have checked that information is in there. So it's not going to be 100%. I think that's fair enough. And I think your point about not knowing about quotes and conversion, yeah, I get that. I see that. I also think that law firms could perhaps collate all this information themselves, arguably, but they're too busy to do it, But isn't it right that firms should be doing what they're best at, which is conveyancing? But wouldn't it be lovely if they made more money out of it, whether that be to invest in their people or their technology, which, as you know, is a huge investment. Equally, I'm massively passionate about market research. I've bought it ever since I was a lender. The old data monitor reports, you're too young to know about those. And more recently, YouGov reports. And I think the beauty of Valafy is that it's very sector specific. So we're not saying to law firms, this is how you compare with another regional law firm. We're saying to a conveyancing department. So, everyone from the CEO right through to the conveyancing department leader, the practice manager, has insight about what's happening within that particular profession at the time.
So it sounds as though, in effect, this is almost like benchmarking your firm against, as you say, another firm, but very specifically another conveyancing firm.
Yeah, so it's benchmarking. So when we return the collated information to you, which is anonymised, and rest assured you're not going to be sold to. So we're not collating this data so we can sell you some fantastic new system or something else. It will show you on a scale how you compare. So we'll have, let's use the example of the number of sale cases you've completed. It will show you the lowest, it will show you the highest, it will show the median, and it will show you where you are on that wheel and how you compare. And then as we go forward, it will show you how that has evolved from the previous quarter. It is very much about benchmarking. And I guess that the hope is that firms will be able to then assess that they're doing a good job, assess that they're charging the right fees, if that's one of the parameters, assess the profitability, and hopefully they'll start to see that improve so that they're getting towards the highest as opposed to the lowest in some cases, let's say, with profitability. So yeah, you summed it up nicely by saying it's a benchmarking report. And as I said, this isn't going to be just for conveyancing. Wills and probate are on the horizon. And I think, it's a sector I know an awful lot about. Having gone into it new, I would argue that there's, even less information available, and it's certainly underserved within wills and probate than it is in conveyancing. And if you're going to ask me why, it probably goes back to, again, the discussion we had on panel management, in that there's less management information, I believe, because panel management doesn't exist in wills and probate. So that's coming very soon as well. Very exciting, and we've had some excellent feedback. We've also had some law firms that say, perhaps it's not for us. We're doing our first survey beginning of April, with the results published early May.
And what are you hoping firms are going to ultimately do with this information? I mean, there is this gap around data and management information. We've done some podcasts about that previously as well. How is this going to really fill that gap so that firms can make informed decisions about how they go forward?
Well, I think if it was me, so if I was running a law firm, I think I would complete the questionnaire. I'd receive the report back. Knowing when the report was going to come back, I'd pull all my relevant people together, and we would sit and page turn the report and see how we compare to others, and challenge each other as to why that might be, and come up with an action plan. And it might be marginal gains. It might be we need to look at our costs. Are we paying too much? Are we paying too little? I would hope that every law firm is reviewing their charges for conveyancing on a quarterly basis. And I'm a great believer, as you know, you've been bored to death by me over the years about talking about discipline. And a quarterly report, I think, could bring some discipline to those discussions as well. And, we're all so busy. It's easy for one quarter to lead into the next. But I think if that's a prompt to get all the relevant people together and question what you're doing, that comes down to our strapline of actionable business insights, doesn't it?
So we can expect this soon. You're starting it, you said, in April, with the plan to publish the first edition in May, was it, Karen?
That's correct, yeah.
And that's going to be in conveyancing, which is where you and Chris have obviously got a lot of background, and you suggested you're going to do wills and probate, which you were obviously very involved in wills and probate for a long while as well. Any ideas when that's going to come down the line?
Oh, imminently. And actually, we've also got accountancy lined up. We've got estate agents. We've got a number of different sectors where we've looked at and think, where is this information not readily available? Care homes. I think we were talking on a personal basis before we started the podcast about care homes. So yeah, we've got a roadmap of what we want to do next, but wills and probate is very imminent. But let's not run before we can walk and get conveyancing under our belt. It's taken a huge amount of time, as you can imagine, to put together these questionnaires, and particularly the reports, to make sure that right from day one they are the right questions. And as you quite rightly challenge, that data and that information is readily available, because what we're trying to do is stop, and I've been guilty of this in the past and you've witnessed it, being busy fools. With the whole point of this is to provide an efficient report back to law firms that would take them a long time to collate. So we want the questionnaire to be as easy to complete as possible. It takes longer and more thought than you recognise until you go to put it together.
And I can understand the conveyancing and the wills and probate angle, obviously, but care homes feels like quite a departure, even from legal services.
Oh, well, we've got big ambitions, as I said. We're not sticking with legal services. We're looking at all kinds of professions where we feel that it will be valuable to know what people's profit margins are, what they charge, are the costs right, can we run this business better, that just aren't readily available. We don't know what all of those are at the moment. So this is a new thing for us to work out which sector we go into next. And that's actually, to be honest with you, David, that's half the fun as well, isn't it?
Well, I wish you all the very best with it, obviously. And it's been fab to have you on the podcast. and hear a little bit more about the business and hear a bit of your insight, Karen. So thanks very much indeed for joining.
I'm really grateful for you inviting me, actually. I feel quite honoured.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Karen. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.